Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Setzer, and I'm going to present briefly today on the process that I went through to restore access to a collection of ebooks, or two collections of ebooks actually, after the vendor stopped supporting the platform that the ebooks were on. So first, a little bit about me. I am the e-resources librarian at North Carolina State University Libraries with a specialty in monographic resources. I've worked at NC State for about a year and a half now, and I spent 4 years working in libraries, smaller academic libraries, before I got to NC State. So I want to start with a timeline of the process so you could visualize everything that took place throughout this project that I kind of worked through. We had purchased these ebooks with perpetual access back before I worked at NC State, and they were hosted on the vendor's platform, and so we had access to them. We use the 360 knowledge base from Ex Libris, and our catalog is Circe. So we were getting MARC records delivered to our catalog from our 360 knowledge base. And in May 2025, I got an email from one of my colleagues that the platform appeared to be down, and checked, and none of the ebooks on the platform were available for us to read from our proxy or from on campus or anything. So I contacted the vendor, but I didn't hear back from them until June. And that's when they informed me that they were sunsetting that entire ebook platform. And I had not received their initial email notice about that, probably because I wasn't on staff here when the ebooks were purchased and they didn't have my contact info. So this was my first time handling anything like this. And the obvious question is, what do I do now? So hopefully this presentation will give a practical picture of how you can proceed if this happens to you. And when I asked the vendor about maintaining access to these, since they were perpetual access, and that's what our license said, that they were perpetual and all of that, the vendor gave us two options for post-termination access. They could send us copies of the content to locally host, or we could use Portico. We were not Portico for eBooks participants, but we were Portico for journals participants, which I didn't even realize there was a distinction at the time. But we decided to activate Portico access, even though it would take the extra step of having to join the Portico ebook program. That would help us to be set up for success if and when this happens again with ebooks. So the next step was getting set up with Portico, and I had to work with Portico and my licensing colleague to complete licensing and payment, and amend our Portico journals agreement. And then I requested access to the ebooks through Portico, but they wait 30 days to give access in case there's a dispute from the vendor. So our access wasn't going to start until August. And in the meantime, I decided to ask the vendor to send me the backup PDF copies of the ebooks, so that I could set those up as like a stopgap measure. So it took me a little while to get the MARC records for those and add them to our catalog, but that happened in July, and so access was restored through that method. And we also finalized licensing with Portico ebooks around July, but we had to wait 30 days to activate the post-termination access. So we actually gained access through Portico in August. So what did we lose access to? It was two ebook collections, almost 600 titles total. Both of them were purchased in 2015 with perpetual access rights. I wanted to show you the actual terms in the license that have to do with perpetual access. I won't read all of them, but the relevant part says that McGraw-Hill may, in its sole discretion, provide perpetual access by continuing to allow licensee to access the subscribed materials via the online platform free of charge. As an alternative, McGraw-Hill will provide licensee with an archival copy of the subscribed materials in an electronic medium to be mutually agreed between the parties. Any such archival copies must be stored by licensee using Portico or such other trusted third-party archive pre-approved in writing by McGraw-Hill. By providing, well, that's all that I was going to read. So that is just a little bit of background. I thought that could be helpful to help understand why I was able to push for continued access to these e-resources, because licensing is important. And so I was able to take this to the vendor and ask them for the archival copies, and that's how I ended up with the two options of locally hosting or portico access. So for the rest of the presentation, I want to talk about 4 big challenges that I ran into in the process of getting access to these ebooks back up and running. These are things that I would recommend watching out for if you're facing this kind of situation, or just for the next time that I have to initiate post-termination access for anything. So the first big challenge I hit was with hosting the PDFs. Since getting our portico access was going to take a while, like I said, I requested that some copies be sent to me so that I could set them up on our local server. And thankfully, we do have a lot of resources that are locally hosted, so we are set up for that. I know other libraries that I've worked at don't already have a process for local hosting, so it's nice that we already did. And I received the files as PDFs through a secure file transfer system. And with almost 600 files, it was a time-consuming process to download them first and then to upload them to our local server. So overall, this wasn't very difficult, but it was time-consuming. And I'll note that the PDF files had the ISBN of the ebook that was in them as their PDF file name, which turned out to be pretty helpful. I'll talk about that later. The next challenge was adding the ebooks language to our existing license with Portico. So we were able to do this through an order form amendment rather than an entirely new license. And that's how we joined the Portico for eBooks program. My colleague managed the license negotiations since she was the owner of the original license, and it just took some time to go back and forth between me and her and the Portico rep to get everything and everyone on the same page. Then it took a while for Portico to send me an invoice, and so again, this was more time consuming than anything. And then probably the biggest challenge of this process turned out to be getting MARC records for the ebooks. I turned off our 360 knowledge base MARC records when I realized that the links didn't work. So it would have been nice to keep them and have a snapshot of how the records had looked in our catalog, but I didn't do that. I requested records from the vendor since I thought that they would still have the records, but they didn't have MARC records for any of the ebooks on the old platform. So I decided to try and use OCLC records for them. So I made a plan to do batch searches for them in OCLC Connection, which was an opportunity for me to learn more about some of the functions of connection that I had never used before. What I did is I made a list, or took a list of the ISBNs from our title list spreadsheet, copied them into a text file, which is this screenshot on this slide, and then I uploaded them into the OCLC batch search feature. So that's what this is, and then this is a screenshot of the search going on, and then this is the results of the search. So you can see that pretty much all of the ISBNs generated duplicate results. And I saved these results to my local file in OCLC and weeded out a few more duplicates there. And then I exported the local file so I could work with it in MARCEdit. So after the export, there were still a lot of duplicates. So I used MARCEdit to extract some of the relevant fields to look at them in Excel and filter them. And the main filters I used were the 337 field to make sure that I was just looking at computer file records, and then the 856 to make sure that it contained the platform URL. So I would know that they came from the same source as my ebooks. And then I matched those links to the link in my title list. So I did kind of like a matching formula. And it took a while to figure out how to do this. So I used Gemini AI to generate some ideas for working with the data. And the end result were some pretty decent MARC records. And once I had the MARC records, I added a 773, which is the field that we use locally for collections. And then I deleted the old 856 fields that didn't work anymore. And to create links to the PDFs on our local server, I used our title list spreadsheet, and I used a concatenate formula in Excel to append our local server base URL with the ISBN and then with the .pdf to create the link. And that actually gave me really reliable links, and I was able to add those into our MARC records as the 856 field. And as a side note, I didn't realize until after I did all this work getting the OCLC records that I could have probably used our 360 knowledge base records and used this concatenate function to create the custom links there. I would probably recommend using that route. You probably still need to do the concatenation, but you'd be saving some time doing all of the OCLC searching and comparing records that I did. So try using knowledge base records. And then the final challenge also had to do with links. Once I got the access set up on the Portico platform, I realized Portico also did not have MARC records for me. And the links to the Portico platform are completely different from the links that I had to our local server, and didn't include any information, like they didn't have the PDF in the links or anything. So I again used that same Excel concatenate function to recreate my local server links in the Portico title list so that my locally hosted links were on the same row with the matching Portico link. And I have a screenshot of that spreadsheet here. And then I saved that as like a text file, and I was able to take the existing MARC records I had in MARC Edit and use the find and replace with external criteria to find all of my ISBN based links and replace them with the Portico links that was on the same line of the spreadsheet. I had too many records to do them all at once in MARC Edit, so I updated the links in batches of 100, do it a few times. And again, I was using Gemini AI for tips for processing these records. And so this is a screenshot of kind of how I figured out how to use the find and replace with external criteria in MARC Edit, because I had never done that before. So to wrap up, I just wanted to pull out these few lessons that I learned from the process, sort of like some closing advice. And I would recommend starting early. So like if you have lost access to an entire platform, really focus on trying to get the ball rolling and be persistent in communication. I wish that I had been more persistent in trying to get the vendor to communicate with me earlier on in the process. I would also recommend, like I said, using your knowledge base bibliographic records if they're available, and learn how to familiarize yourself with tools like OCLC Connection, Excel, and MARC Edit, and don't be afraid to try new things with those tools. With this being my first time dealing with anything like this, it was a struggle to know what steps to take. So again, I really hope this presentation will come in handy for those of you who face a situation like this. I put some recommended reading on this slide for you to get started if you're interested in more about Portico and post-termination access. I couldn't find a lot of like practical advice on what to do for post-termination access, so I hope that this presentation can help fill that gap. So that's all that I have time for today, but best of luck with your own post-termination access journey, and please email me if you have questions. I'll also be at the Q&A session on Wednesday, so happy to chat and answer questions there too. Thanks, y'all.